We are now taking over the airwaves. This is Ultimate You Radio. We are here to create extraordinary change through mindset, nutrition, and training. Life is way too short not to be the ultimate version of you.
How we doing, everybody? Welcome to UI Radio. We have an awesome episode today. I'm super excited. We've got a really inspiring guest with an incredible story all the way from Toronto, Canada, but at the moment in Palm Springs, I believe, which is exciting for you. You are the author of two incredible books, best-selling books of The Undiet, Eat Your Way to Vibrant Health, as well as the creator of the world's first culinary nutrition expert certificate. And you've also got an Academy of Culinary Nutrition, which is really exciting. I can't wait to talk to you more about it. But I think one of the coolest things about your story is how you were diagnosed with Crohn's disease and, of course, overcame that, healed yourself, and now using that wisdom to change others' lives, which I really think is super inspiring. And that special guest is Meghan Telpner. Welcome to UI Radio. How you doing?
Good. Thanks for having me. You basically told my story. I don't have anything else to say now.
I know, and that's it. The show's over. Thank you for coming. No. So we've got so much more to talk about. I know your story can go quite in depth, and there's some really, really great sort of nuggets of gold that I'd love to share with our community, and I can't wait to share that. So again, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Awesome. So let's start from the beginning. How did you get into this space, into health and wellness, and I guess share your story with us?
Yeah. So as we were sort of chatting about just before, I did an exchange university in Sydney when I was in uni and I was actually studying fashion marketing, worked in advertising for a while, did more traveling, and ended up getting sick in a situation where no one could sort of tell me what was wrong or diagnose me. And so it took 3 years, 19 doctors, until in the summer of 2006, I was diagnosed with Crohn's. And that was what inspired me to move out of the field of new media and fashion and advertising into health and wellness. And so I enrolled after I got better. So with a diagnosis with most autoimmune conditions, still conventional medicine will tell us that there's no known cause, no known cure. Here are the medications, potential surgeries, or other medical interventions. And I was 26 at the time. I didn't, the conventional treatments for Crohn's are incredibly unpleasant. And so I decided to take a bit of a different direction and see what I could do on my own. And so I went into the kitchen, discovered this place in my apartment I'd never really spent much time in, and taught myself how to cook. And it was basically from researching and learning about foods that could potentially help and foods that were on the harmful side, and stuck with the helpful ones and learned to cook and started getting Chinese medicine, acupuncture treatments, taking herbal remedies, practicing yoga and meditation, all these things I'd read about that weren't nearly as popular, 12 years ago as they are now. And the result was that within a few months, I was symptom-free. And that was, again, almost 12 years ago. And there's been no recurrence of the disease. And that was what inspired me to go back to school, something I never thought I would ever do, and study nutrition. And that's how I ended up in this space doing this work.
Wow, amazing. So just to give us a bit of contrast and context, what was your lifestyle like before you discovered the kitchen? So you discovered this new world where you could cook your own food and all of the goodness that comes with that. What did life look like before that? I
think it was very typical of someone in their early 20s sort of living on their own for the first time, where I didn't really know how to cook. I ordered in, I ate out a lot. I was, had a new job. I was working like crazy. I was going to the gym at 5 a.m. and just didn't know how to the way I described it is I didn't know how to exhale. I didn't know how to relax and be present. I could never be in silence. I could never, it was just constant distraction from whatever was going awry in my life. And so, I ate a pretty standard diet. I lived, I think, how most, people in their early 20s live, going out a lot and traveling a lot and, having fun. But unfortunately, with a health condition like that, it's pretty limiting.
Yeah. So how long did it take for you to actually get diagnosed with Crohn's?
It took 3 years. So, when you look through the literature of inflammatory bowel disease or most autoimmune disease, they'll tell you that there are no signs or symptoms until it happens. And I don't believe that that's true. I think that sometimes the signs and symptoms aren't directly connected, so aren't always identified. Where I'd had issues with anxiety, I'd had issues with, due to anxiety, not being able to sleep very well. I'd been having digestive issues. I'd been having all these things that now, knowing what I know and looking at health from a functional and holistic perspective, it was so obvious that I was going down this path that would have resulted in some disease diagnosis. It just, with all of us having our own genetic makeup, we'll all have our own sort of destined weakest link. And that was where my weakest link ended up being. And that's how I ended up with Crohn's. Just the same way someone could end up with, early diagnosis of rheumatoid arthritis, or someone could end up with chronic back pain or migraines or, weight issues. We will all channel it into different ways based on our own genetic makeup. But if you're going down a path of disease instead of going up a path of health, you're going to end up with something. It's just a matter of what it is and how long it takes to get there.
Yeah, very true, very true. So would you be able to just explain to our listeners what is Crohn's disease and what sort of happened for you in that process?
Yeah, so Crohn's is an autoimmune inflammatory bowel disease. There's two most common ones. One is Crohn's, one is colitis, whereas colitis just affects the large intestine, and Crohn's can affect any part of the digestive system from the mouth to your exit point, and causes extreme inflammation or strictures or anything from fever, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, blood loss, and then any number of complications that result from those symptoms, like extreme malnutrition from lack of nutrient absorption.
Wow. So for 3 years, you were obviously experiencing these symptoms and uncomfortable and pain and not knowing what was going on.
Interestingly, it wasn't for the full 3 years. It got progressively worse and worse. And I was going to all these doctors, and I was going to, I'd been traveling in Africa. So I was going to tropical disease specialists and being checked for parasites, being checked for that kind of thing. Then when they didn't find anything there, they were sending me to psychologists being like, maybe it's all in your head. And so they put me down that path. I'm like, it's not that. It's in my body. So it took time for me to get bad enough, for my symptoms to get severe enough to have that sort of naming of the disease, which is what conventional medicine first was the diagnosis. Again, from the perspective I come from now in the work that I do, we look at the symptoms in a different way, being not, grouping these symptoms to give it a name, rather than look at the symptoms and be like, okay, how do we remedy these from the root cause? Therefore, like from the health perspective in which I work, and my husband as well, who's a functional medicine practitioner, we are looking at the symptoms and how we can figure out what the imbalances are in the body that cause those symptoms, so that we don't need a diagnosis. We just need to know the symptoms, and then we can work to heal them. For me, not having, the extent of my knowledge around human anatomy, biology, and science was like 10th grade biology class. So, middle of high school. But to me, it seemed obvious that foods that pass through the body are going to affect your health. And once I had the sort of naming, or they've named what I had, I could see what was actually going on and sort of look at it from that perspective. And then with my very, very limited knowledge at that point, start to figure things out myself. And that's really what inspired the work that I do now, in that I don't ever want anyone to be in that position where they can't get those answers and they're left on their own to figure it out.
Yeah. I mean, it must have been a bit of a relief to finally be able to just pinpoint some type of reason for what was going on, so you could move forward and figure out a solution. Yeah.
It was a relief. It was also, it was more, I was just like, I knew it wasn't all in my head. That was the feeling I had.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it was also challenging because the prognosis is not good typically for this. It's like, it's considered a lifelong disease, and I didn't want to be sick the rest of my life. At the same time, the arrogance of my doctor opened the door for me to figure it out when he said, nothing you eat is going to affect you. I realized that maybe they don't have all the answers, and it really forced me. And maybe that's part of my personality. I've never done real well with authority or being told what I can or can't do. And that's what sort of lit the fire for me to figure this out and see what I could do. And maybe it was to prove them wrong. Maybe it was just to ultimately live a better life. And thankfully, I followed the right path for myself.
So going through that 3-year process of managing and dealing with, I guess, the uncertainty and, of course, all of the things that are going on internally for you, how did you handle that mentally and emotionally? Can you tell us a little bit about that sort of journey?
Yeah, that's a good question. And it's not easy. I was fortunate that my mother has had a long time confidence in what's often referred to as alternative medicine. And so I had the support of my parents in taking a bit of a different route. It is challenging socially, for sure. And having people close to me in the medical field who were like, what are you doing? Like, you're really doing something dangerous here. And for some people, it might have been very dangerous. So it was hard to have the confidence and faith in my own instincts and intuition to follow that. That was really hard. It was hard having to sort of re-navigate how I lived my life. I just sort of come into adulthood and was just living on my own. And suddenly this whole image or vision of the life I was going to live was no longer relevant. And so there was a bit of this sort of lostness, being like, okay, what do I do next? Or what's my next step? And how am I going to navigate my life now? And what's my social circle going to look like? Because going out to bars and that kind of thing doesn't serve me anymore. Never really did, but I didn't know what else to do. And so that part is really hard. And I think the social isolation that people experience when they start changing their diet or modifying their lifestyle is one of the hardest things, because people still want to, go out for pizza, go out for beers, go out and, just socialize like everyone else does. And for a while I tried to do it, and I would do it differently. And ultimately what ended up happening was, I was on this elevator and the doors open, and I was on a new floor with all new people that really supported this lifestyle and were part of it and wanted to live in a similar way. But that transition period is scary and can be very lonely.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so important. If you want to evolve and change, I often talk about this with our clients who go through, these lifestyle shifts, and it's so true. You sometimes have to, or you do have to surround yourself with new groups of people that do support you in your new lifestyle and can help lift you up rather than pull you down, which is so important.
Absolutely. And what I often tell my students now too, because when they go through my program, they often find that their partners or children or parents or whatever their situation is are resistant to the changes they're making. And I always remind them that it has nothing to do with you. It's their own stuff. It's their fear that you're going to try and impose it on them, or they're going to be pushed to change or do something they're not ready for. And ultimately, we're all on our own journey. And I think that if you can find some level of a support network and find the people, or surround yourself with the people who are encouraging and want that too, and also want to live a vibrant and healthy and positive force in life, it can make or break your success.
Yeah, very, very true. Very true. It's so inspiring. You first of all, you figured it out yourself, which is just incredible. You challenged authority, which I love. You did a great job there. And then, of course, you made huge lifestyle shifts, and obviously it worked wonders. You healed yourself from a disease that apparently is stuck with you for life. What an amazing thing to do. And it was basically through your nutrition, right? So you changed what you were eating and how you were living life. And of course, you've published 2 books on it, which is incredible. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about your philosophy and what is it? What does it mean?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was one of the lucky ones sort of in the earlier days of health and nutrition that had a publisher come to me for a book, which is a bit different now. But my publisher had come to me wanting me to write a diet book. And up until that point, I hadn't really thought about what I was doing as a diet. And I didn't want to write a diet book because then I could never write another book again. It's like, well, you put this diet, this is the best diet in the world, that's what it is. And so instead I sort of took some time to figure out how I could define my philosophy. And that's where Undiet came about, in that it's not about one way of eating or, the one size fits all approach. And like, as we see today, if you are vegan and all you read are vegan blogs and all you follow are vegan people on Instagram, all you're going to be served is more information to support veganism. If you are paleo or ketogenic and that's all you read and that's all you follow, you'll only be served more information that that is the right thing to do. And the reality is that there's no one size fits all, and the diet that heals us may not be the diet that sustains us for life. And so what I wanted to do with all my work is to invite readers and followers and clients and students to determine for themselves the ultimate food philosophy that will best serve them. And so what we do in Undiet is we break down, the absolute never evers, the foods that will build disease in everybody who consumes them. They consume them ongoing. We broke down why calories are an irrelevant measure for our health, why you need to find the right kind of movement and exercise that makes you feel really, really great and that's something you want to do. How to live an low impact lifestyle so that your dietary and lifestyle choices are actually sustainable, not just for you, but if every person on the planet wanted to follow it. How to get rid of the other chemicals in our lives in personal care and home care. And that's what Undiet and my books are about, is how we can embrace not a diet that's like, here's a 6-week quick fix to fit into a pair of jeans, but here's a lifestyle transition that will ultimately transform the way you live. And as a side benefit, improve your health, improve your relationships, improve your levels of happiness, improve your productivity, your success, allow you to live that life of your dreams today. So it's not something that you're constantly chasing, but it's the tools to put it into action. So I give the hows and the whys and the whats and the whens and let people find their way through it and ultimately make the choices knowing exactly why they're being made, not because, some nutritionist they've never met is telling them that this is how they need to live to be happy and healthy.
Yeah, amazing. And I mean, we often hear at Ultimate You, we talk about mindset, nutrition, and training as 3 core pillars to transform your life. And I love that you mentioned making it sustainable, because you really have to if you want this to be a lifelong shift. What are some of your tips to make this lifestyle shift with nutrition especially sustainable long term? What are some of the things that you teach?
Yeah, and this is something that's actually in my first book on diet, because everyone wants that action plan. They want, I want to know what I get that I have to create my own philosophy and create my own diet and do it. What do I actually have to do? So what I recommend is you have your starting place and you have your end goal. And in my book, I offer an 8-week transition program, but you can create your own. And it's basically to take on a couple new things each week that you can sustain. So it's really meeting yourself where you're at now and creating a plan. So if that means you just had water, if that means that I'm going to drink more water. So this week I'm going to commit to increasing my water intake by X amount, and I'm going to find strategies to do it. One great way is if you have, a reusable water bottle, you put your rubber bands at the bottom, and every time you refill it, you move a band to the top so you know how much you've had that day or every couple days. So let's say you're going to start week 1, really easy, drink more water, get more sleep. Those 2 things can have such a massive impact on your health. Everyone likes the details, like what's the best probiotic to take, or is this the right water purification system? Just drink water, get some sleep. So if those are your first changes in week 1, what are you going to add to that in week 2 while keeping week 1's changes? And so you're building in a sustainable way. If you're already drinking tons of water, getting lots of sleep, eating all organic, exercising regularly, your first steps are going to be very different than the person who's going to the drive-through still. So that way it is building up, that way it's sustainable. The biggest mistake people make is they'll read a book or they listen to a podcast or they watch a documentary and they're like, oh my goodness, I need to change everything. And they clear out their house, their kitchen, do everything all at once. And it's such an extreme shift that they ultimately are setting themselves up to fail because it can't be sustained. They don't know the whys behind it, or it's just too much all at once. And they're like, oh, I can't do this. And so they swing the other way on that pendulum. And that's where we get all those, all the trending diets end up sort of taking people in that way. And I'm really focused on, making the changes, sticking with them, having the non-negotiable things. I don't believe in all things in moderation. I think that when you understand why you're making certain choices, they're easier and become those non-negotiable things and ultimately raise your set point of what you will and just will not do in your life.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. And again, that is the key to long-term success. Make it sustainable. And of course, I love that you sort of gradually implement things as well, not to overwhelm people immediately. And I think that's, a really important step as well. That's awesome. I'm fascinated by the connection between food and mindset. So food and the mental side and the emotional side of human beings. I just think it's so important for to live a healthy, happy life. I'm wondering what's your take on that, and what have you noticed in regards to making a shift in your nutrition and the mental and emotional side of people?
Yeah, I think that you see people make the shift often from one direction or the other, meaning that they'll either start by dealing with their mental, emotional well-being, and ultimately their food choices and lifestyle choices will shift, or they start with their food and lifestyle and ultimately their mental, emotional will shift. And part of that is, the connection we have between our gut and our brain, that axis that we make more melatonin in our gut, or more serotonin in our gut than in our brain. And so if we start to look at the diet component first, let's say, and we are eating processed food and having a lot of alcohol and caffeine and sugar, and these things are going to elevate our blood sugar and cause these crashes. And as a result, we end up with elevated adrenaline and cortisol, the body's stress responses. We're going to be in a more anxious, hyperactive state in the mind and in our emotional body. And you can't find health in that state. That's when inflammatory conditions start to take hold. Now, if instead you're eating a diet that's balancing your blood sugar, that's stable, which is usually high fat, high protein, high fiber, then you are producing the hormones that will help us neurologically to remain more stable and more balanced. Vice versa, if you are a meditator or practicing yoga regularly, you become more tuned in to how your body feels and how your body will respond to food. And so if you take it from the mental, emotional side first, do that work, and you start to recognize that, I love the taste of coffee, but if I get really anxious and jittery 30 minutes after, I get an upset stomach 30 minutes after, or, I would love this bowl of pasta, but I know that I'm going to have an adrenaline spike in the middle of the night, wake up at 4 a.m, not able to get back to sleep. So no matter which direction you take it, it's 100% connected. And when you have a healthy body, you have a healthy mind, healthy body. They are, like you said, completely interconnected. And it's very rare that you will find someone who experiences true health. Now, this isn't about drinking all the smoothies and having all the kale salads. That doesn't necessarily make you happy or healthy. But someone who has true health and balance in the foods they eat, the work they do, the partner they've chosen, the family they're in, the community they're a part of, will have that mental, emotional well-being. And when you have that mental, emotional well-being, you choose to surround yourself with people who support that. And so that connection just continues to wind tighter and tighter. You can't have one without the other.
Yeah, and it's so powerful. And as you said, it then affects every facet of your life. It doesn't just affect your body and how you feel, but your work improves, your relationships improve, everything else just exponentially grows, which is, that's what we want, right? An extraordinary life. And I really think that these are the foundational pieces that we need in order to achieve that. And I love that's part of your philosophy.
Yeah. And we've been seeing that now that I have a 7-month-old baby, in him, and making sure that he's eating regularly and his blood sugar stays stable and that we're calm around him and happy. And, we see when my husband and I embrace or, show affection, like he smiles, he sees that, and having that reflect back on us, just solidifies our commitment 1,000-fold more to be able to offer him that gift.
Yeah, amazing. So you've had an incredible journey and you've overcome Crohn's with the power of nutrition, with the power of wellness. What are 3 big lessons that you've learned that you'd love to share with the community and everyone listening right now?
Oh my goodness, just 3. I'm really bad with these kinds of questions. One, I think, is to take others' opinions with a grain of salt. It's so easy for other people to tell you what you should or shouldn't do and cast judgment on the choices you're making. They are giving those opinions, I hope, with the best of intentions, but it's from their own perspective on life. And you can take it, you can digest it, you can do what you want with it, but ultimately it's up to you. I think that leads to the next point, which is that the writing is always on the wall, that we ultimately truly always know what we need to do. And often it's usually fear or doubt or hard work that prevents us from following what we know to be true. And so if we take others' opinions with a grain of salt and recognize the writing is on the wall, that if we can tune into our instincts and be brave enough to follow that, those two things alone, nothing to do with diet or nutrition or anything, but that will transform how you live and what you say yes and what you say no to. And I think the third lesson is really that that we are ever evolving, and we cannot try to keep things as they are today. That's our surest direct line to our own suffering. And so whether that means the diet you eat today may not be the diet of tomorrow, you should never, ever, ever get your diet of choice tattooed on your body, which people do, because it is part of a community and can become cult-like or like a religion. But we're always evolving. And so it's really important to keep tuning in so that you never force stagnation on your health and well-being, because it will build disease in the body. So I guess if I had to phrase them, it would be take others' opinions with a grain of salt, the writing's on the wall, and never stifle your own evolution.
I love that. Gold. And that's a great segue into my next question, which is, I believe I read that you were once vegan or vegetarian, and then you started introducing meats back into your diet. Is that right?
That is right. And so I, through nutrition school, somehow came out of it. It was interesting because I met my husband in nutrition school, and my husband is the scientist. He loves research and researching and reading studies, and that's his focus. But we both went through the same program, and I came out of it feeling like I'd been indoctrinated that plant-based was the best, vegetarian, vegan, and he didn't. And I said, why not? He said, I never found the research to support it. And it's true. There's never been a culture in the history of mankind that elected to be vegan until now, until 50 years ago. But so I started on it. I felt really good on it for a while. But then a lot started falling apart, which is pretty common. And the challenge is that a lot of people who identify with these diets then don't ever reveal, especially if they are known for them or wrote a book on them or have a podcast or a blog that advocates for one way of eating. But I never really identified with any of the labels. And what happened to me was that in 2011, I was in a really bad car accident and couldn't recover. So I couldn't recover physically. I couldn't recover emotionally. I was having nightmares. And so my husband, we were engaged at the time, and he'd said, maybe you should start eating a little bit more protein. I was like, no, I can't. I kept thinking about cows in the field and how beautiful they are, and I couldn't do it. And then I'd never had a cavity in my life. And after 6 months, I went to the dentist. I had 11 cavities, and I'd never had a cavity. And then I started looking into that, and I saw vitamin K2, which I don't think I was eating anything. It's primarily in butter. And so slowly and I started carrying extra weight. I was carrying about an extra 10 pounds despite exercising more and doing everything I thought I was supposed to do. And so all these things kept building until I realized that my diet that I thought was the best way of eating was no longer serving me. And shortly after my husband and I got married, I was like, I'm going to be a good wife. I'm going to make him dinner, which though I cook at the time, I was doing a lot of cooking classes. So I wasn't cooking a lot at home for just to make dinner. But I was like, I'm going to make him meatballs and, make him this big, nice, hearty dinner. And I made them, and I was like, I should probably make sure they're good, because I'd never actually cooked with meat. And I had one, and I couldn't stop eating them. And then I didn't touch meat for another 6 months, and I slowly transitioned, and that was my experience. And now, we mix it up. We have lots of strictly plant-based meals. We have meals with meat, fish, wild game. We've slowly started introducing some organ meats, because I think that if you're going to eat animals, you have to be really, really conscious about it. And I think that we should be using all the bits and pieces. So that's a work in progress. We've got our baby started on some organ meats. But for us, we're not accustomed to the stronger taste. So that's been my experience. And with my students in my school, I really encourage them to be open. The way I eat, I would never impose on everyone else on the planet. That we really need to, if we're working in a professional way, to meet our clients where they're at and really help them based on their specific needs. So that's how I transitioned.
Yeah, absolutely. What physical and sort of mental shifts did you notice when you transitioned back on eating more proteins?
I was sleeping better. That was the first huge change. I started sleeping better and my energy was way more stable. Prior to that, I was sort of hungry all the time. I'd have these massive bowls of oatmeal for breakfast and like start on that adrenaline blood sugar crash roller coaster. So I was hungry all the time. So I was sleeping better. My energy was better and I lost weight, which was never really my firm intention. It just happened. And since then, so it's now been 5 years since I transitioned my diet. Aside from being pregnant, my weight has not changed. My body hasn't changed. And even post-pregnancy, I did not pay much attention to. I wasn't really interested in having a hardcore workout. They have post-baby boot camps. I was just like, I just need to take care of myself and him. And again, went back to the physical size and shape that I'm comfortable with. So there's been those sort of benefits and I feel better. I eat and I feel full and I feel satiated and it's the right thing for me right now. It may change.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So for our listeners that are wanting to make the shift and of course, change their lifestyle, start eating some delicious, clean foods, but they've probably had a bit of a crappy diet. They've been eating maybe sugars and oxidized fats and the not so good stuff. Often we find that people have sugar cravings when they're sort of shifting in the beginning. Do you have any little strategies for our listeners that can help them overcome sugar cravings?
I do. The best thing to do when it comes to sugar is actually to quit cold turkey, just stop with sugar. I actually, in the fall, I guess it's your spring, but in October, I ran in Canada, we have Halloween. People go door to door and get candy. So it's October 31st and November 1st, I started this no sugar challenge and I was doing it as just like a little small thing. It was like $12 to join. We ended up with 1,000 people quitting sugar for a week. They didn't have to buy, you don't have to buy anything to quit sugar for a week, but they wanted that motivation. Sugar is a drug. In my first book, there's a study I referenced, I don't remember it off the top of my head, but that sugar has been shown to be more addictive than heroin. And it tickles the brain the same way that getting likes on social media do. It, offers that dopamine release that is highly addictive. And the best way to stop with sugar is to stop all sugar. And what's really amazing, if you give it, say, 7 days or 10 days, no sugar, but also no honey, no maple syrup, no artificial sweetener for sure, no stevia even, no dried fruit, no fruit juices, like no concentrated sources of sugar. You can have whole fruits. What happens after 7 days or 10 days or 2 weeks and you have something with just the smallest amount of sugar, it's like overwhelmingly sweet. You change your taste buds, you change your set point for that sweetener. So if you're kicking sugar, I would say commit to it 100%. Give yourself 1 week, 100% commitment, because as soon as you allow yourself that moderation of sugar or, the cheat days, you end up spending the next 6 days waiting for that one day that you can enjoy your food. Whereas if instead you focus on the abundance of delicious, real, unprocessed foods that are available, do the most of the cooking in your kitchen as much as you can, you're automatically, even without limiting what you have, if you can commit to eating mostly food you've made, you're cutting out so much sugar and salt and those oxidized fats you mentioned. And then start to focus on, maybe I should have, less of this or more of that. But if you can just start to clean it all up and establish those new habits, the food starts to taste different. When we eat at restaurants, and we do once in a while, they still seem so salty to us just because it's not the volume of salt we'd ever use in our own home cooking.
Yeah, very true. And I find that it's really that 7 to 14 day period that's the most challenging, isn't it? Mentally, emotionally, you've really just stick it out and fight through it, don't you? And after that, it becomes almost easy.
Yeah, but what's interesting about that is that if I said to you, like, you need to cut out broccoli for the next 7 days, you wouldn't notice. It's just like a food you're not eating. But if you have to cut out sugar, you have to cut out coffee, or even alcohol, it's something that it's so habit forming and creates that chemical response in the body. That's when we know something is dangerous. You can get rid of apples. It's no problem, or brown rice, or cut out steak for a week. You'll be fine. You probably won't notice. You'll have something else instead. But it's these foods that are so hard to shake those are the ones we have to watch out for.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's also about reframing our associations around sugars and those sweet things that we associate happiness and de-stressing and all of these things to these foods, when we need to start labeling the good stuff in the same way.
Yeah, but you know what? No one ever, like they refer to them as comfort food, right? But no one has ever been comfortable being sick or being tired or being overweight or being chronically inflamed or being irritable and having short attention spans, or, you know, that never brought anyone happiness.
Yes.
So it's reframing what brings you joy. Go watch a sunset.
Very true. Get out of that instant gratification mentality. Very, very important. So Meghan, I want to ask you a question. If we could put you in a time machine and send you back to meet your younger self, what is a really important message you would deliver to you in order to make your future life better?
Wait, how young am I?
Let's say you go back to 1920. So yeah.
Okay. I think that I would just recognize that the things I worry about today aren't that important. And I think that we all spend so much time thinking that if we create something, that we're like in the state right now of creating something to bring us to a future place of happiness. And if we are in that state, we're always going to be chasing it. So let's figure out a way to happily create today so that we are not worrying about the things that will not matter to us in 5 years or 10 years. Because if we all think about it, if you think about, 5 years ago, Facebook comes up with these Facebook memories and you see things you were posting, you're like, that was so irrelevant. But at that time it seemed so important, or such a worry or such a stress. And everything's okay. And everything is okay. And, one of my favorite mantras is that the universe conspires in our favor. And so if we can kind of go with the flow and recognize things for what they are, life is just so much easier and it's more enjoyable to live, and you can be in the moment a lot more. And so that's what I would tell. I've been a worrier my whole life. And so, I think a lot of people who practice regular meditation don't do it because they've always been easy breezy and carefree. We do it because we need it. And it's a survival strategy and a survival tactic. And so I think that learning to have that presence and know that, it's okay, is such a valuable lesson. But the thing is, no one could ever tell me what to do. And I wouldn't have listened. I would have been like, oh, you don't understand. My older self to my younger self would have been like, you don't understand.
Yeah. Absolutely. I love that. But it's so important. Appreciate the now. And I guess live with more gratitude is just sort of what you're saying, right? Gratitude for the
Absolutely.
now. Right here, right now. I love that. So I've had an absolute blast talking to you. Where can our listeners and our community find out more about you, what you're doing, and of course, your philosophy?
Absolutely. So I'm at meghantelpner.com online, and at Meghan Telpner with an H. So it's MEGH because I got a lot of heart, AN, Meghan Telpner on Instagram. And if you're interested in learning more about the Academy of Culinary Nutrition, becoming certified as a culinary nutrition expert, our program starts in September. It's 14 weeks start to finish, and that's all at culinarynutrition.com. We now have 1,500 graduates in 54 countries, a huge cohort in Australia, in fact, because I know that health and wellness is huge there, and luckily you have the weather to support it, which is so nice. But that's where I am, and that's what I'm doing.
Awesome. Meghan, you're an absolute inspiration. Thank you so much for joining me on UI Radio. Keep fighting the good fight. You're doing such amazing things out there, and I love just having these good conversations with people like you. So again, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. It was so fun.
Bye.
Bye.